Hello and welcome back. We're here at Healthcare Unblocked 2019. What a day it's been so far. Great conversations going on. We're also having many different guests coming on so far for NR4 Media, talking all things, of course, like the name suggests, within blockchain, but also, of course, within how medtech is changing and their thoughts, really. So we've had a lot of different consultants on, we've had a lot of different technologists on, and a lot of different people who are somewhere in between. We can't say for certain, but somebody who I would like to class as in that category as somewhere in between. I'd now like to introduce our next guest, PhD Dr. Jane Thomason, who is the CEO for a company called Fintech Worldwide. Jane, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, it's great to be here.
Yeah, what a day so far. It's got a lot of buzz around it.
No, it's really exciting because I was here last year and it's just interesting to see how far the industry's developed just in 12 months.
It's been an interesting year for the industry. It's been it goes through months and months, ups and downs really. But I think towards coming to the end of this year anyway, with it's been a big summer. I know there's been a lot of events going on all around the world, Malta, Singapore, whatever, you name it. But it's winding down slightly. Can you give us your thoughts on this financial year and what you predict for 2020 within blockchain?
So I think what we've seen is the falling away of the people who were only involved in blockchain during the crypto hype. And I think that that's a good thing. And I think that who's left now when you go to these different meetings and conferences and speak to people in industry is people who are seriously trying to deploy this for different industry verticals and who believe in this technology. So I think we've kind of lost the superficial players and we've kept the serious ones. And I think that there are a lot of people whose projects are really developing to the point where they're showing real benefits, particularly probably moving fastest in supply chain and payments because, they're the kind of first relevant applications. But for healthcare, both in the UK but also in emerging markets, payments is a critical part of every healthcare function and insurance. So I think we shouldn't minimise the importance of the payments and the supply chain angles because these are all critical parts of a healthcare system.
You're absolutely right about the fact that I think nowadays in blockchain, there's just big time players in it. I think maybe the name blockchain and crypto got smeared through the mud back in 2017. It's changing now. And this is something that you're trying to do right now with your new company, Fintech Worldwide, which obviously is trying to, I suppose, from my angle, before we went live on camera, is that you're trying to educate people on day-to-day usage of blockchain, any white papers that are coming out. Is that correct? Or can you educate me more?
Well, we actually published a book. Please feel free to get it. It's called Blockchain Technologies and
What a plug.
Global Social Change. But what it was is to fill that gap, because what I found is that you've got a lot of really complicated technical papers. You've also got a lot of marketing papers, but you've got very few places that you can go, first of all, to understand the technology in layman's terms, and then to understand how the technology solves real problems that people have got today. So that's what we've tried to do in the book. So we talk about healthcare, we talk about government, we talk about humanitarian settings, we talk about payments, we talk about agriculture. These are all areas in which blockchain is going to be able to significantly improve the way things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's still a little bit of work to be done, from my opinion anyway. Now, I know I've got to stay quite neutral in my stance as the interviewer, but I still think there's work to be done. But there is progression within medtech as well. And from what you've heard today, from some of the talks and conversations going on, is that even more reinforced?
So I think healthcare is a really tough sector. And it's particularly a tough sector in places like the UK and Australia, where we have highly regulated systems, and we also have healthcare systems that work quite well. So the motivation to make the sort of big changes, because you hear people saying flip it on the head, the model gets flipped on the head, and I think it's going to take a long time for that to happen here. But my interest and where a lot of my research work takes place is in emerging markets, and they're going to be flipping because they're flipping in the absence often of any system whatsoever, and people don't get care. So I think where we're going to learn about how to use this and the benefits is going to be in Nigeria, in India, in China we're already seeing.
Even the States?
Yeah, maybe because they're so focused on payments.
Okay.
But they worry about payments.
Pretty not diplomatic answer, but I appreciate it nonetheless. So, I mean, if you're going to relate it though to an event like this, like you said with MedTech as well, and the fact that you've got the NHS within the UK, Australia's got a pretty good healthcare system, a lot of Europe has a very good healthcare system. Would you say though that within one of the things that's struggling it to get past the line, and maybe some of the things that actually makes it kind of more sticky, is the fact that there's a lot of invested interest, because a lot of consultants happen to be working for the NHS themselves. So really, it's that a lot of doctors are getting maybe even colleagues in their ears, maybe from different trusts, saying, let's implement this, let's implement that, when really it might be that they've got potentially invested interest. What's your thoughts on that? Because I know the reason I'm asking you that question is because we're in a similar area of media.
No, absolutely, because there's a lot of vested interest, and we had a panel earlier today around data and patient empowerment, having access to their data, but everyone but the patients currently owns the data. The doctors own it, the hospitals own it, the people who provide the data systems own it, and the insurers own it. They're not going to give it up unless they can see a really strong value proposition for them. So you've got all of these middlemen who own the data. There's a philosophical standpoint which is quite correct, which is you and I should own our own data and decide who accesses it. But to get from where we are now to where we have all of our health records in one data wallet is a big leap.
Well, we're discussing that now. I know we're going quite in depth, but the terminology that I heard earlier on today was that younger generation are digital natives. They know exactly kind of what's going on, or I like to think so anyway. But maybe there's a bit of a generation divide. I could be completely wrong in saying that there's different generations who care more about their data than others. But then when you get tokenization involved in it for a currency or for a value or anything like that, do you think that's starting to get murky? Or do you think for the greater good, for what they get out of it, for what they do with the data, it's beneficial?
Well, that question came up today, and I think that there needs to be some experimentation, because where it came up today was in relation to we can't continue to look after people in physical structures like hospitals. It's unaffordable. We've got too many old people, too many mental health, too many people with chronic conditions. The health system can't cope now. So we have to find as much as possible how people can look after themselves, take action by themselves, and with digital tools be able to monitor and care for themselves without having to go and be resident in a hospital. That's a must, because the health system can't be sustained. So then the second thing is, who can uptake first? And the answer, of course, is going to be the younger, digitally savvy population. But interestingly enough, there's evidence to show that the elderly are actually feel supported and enabled with different sorts of internet and digital support because they're lonely. So they can get information, advice 24 hours a day, ask questions.
Alexa.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a lot of people's best friends right now, that's the truth of it.
So I just think you need to kind of segment the population and think about what's available that we could make available to people, whether it's wearables or whether it's social platforms, and then we need to be targeting those groups and gradually build it up. Because sometimes people go, well, we have to completely, turn the system on its head and completely redo the way we do medical records. No, well, we don't. We can't. And we won't, and no one will let you. So you start somewhere else, and then gradually these things start to creep into the rest of the system as you see the benefit of these changes.
I think there will be benefits and changes. I'm positive for it as well. But like we said, there's changes coming, and there's got to be a lot of hard work still about it. Just quickly before we have to unfortunately start to wrap things up, thoughts on today?
Look, today's great, and what it's about, and I think I take my hat off to Helen and people like her, is that we need to be building an education function so there's somewhere who people are interested can come and find out about the technology, find out where it is, and start thinking about how it's going to apply to their work. And so I think it's really, really important to have events like this. And it's a great day. There's smart people here, good conversations. I've really enjoyed it.